Welcome to Conversations. My name is Suresh Kochate. The US government has finally decided to crack down on the wokeism in campuses. We know the problem that we face in India. We used to be seeing protest of the Tukade gang in JNU, Jadavpur University, University of Hyderabad, FLU and many other places. Now comes the news that the US government has decided to get strict, not just by pulling back funds from different universities, that's federal funding, but also packing up and asking the demonstrators to leave. The administration's warning came in just after it pulled in millions of dollars from the kind of US funding, the government funding that was going on, from Columbia University to start with. The Trump administration was very clear, and it's warned 60 universities in the United States on Monday that they could also face penalties and pending investigations into anti-Semitism on college campuses, something that was seen for a long time since the October 7th brutal attack by Hamas on Israel happened. Instead of helping Israel and Jews, there was protest from the sympathizers of Hamas, openly putting up posters, camping in campuses and all that. Now the threat has sharpened from the US government, and recently the first of its funding cancellations came for Columbia University. And of course, an arrest of a leader who was protesting there, who was actually a green card holder. Now he is being deported. Of course, a federal judge has stayed it. That's a different story. In fact, the list of 6 schools included colleges from both the Republican and Democrat voting states, elite Ivy League schools such as Brown and Yale, and state schools including Arizona State University and the University of Tennessee, and even smaller universities like the Mulhanga College in Allentown, and of course our 2,000 students, which has over 2,000 students. President Trump is seized on the accusation of anti-Semitism as a cudgel, and he wants to really take it up against the Democrats during his presidential campaign, and has continued to prioritize the issue from the White House. President Trump's push comes across as college campuses are embroiled in debates over what precisely constitutes anti-Semitism, and whether that definition should include protest against Israel, even as many of the protesters themselves claim to be Jewish, which is very strange. One can understand, Palestinians protesting, or even citizens of United States protesting, or China for that matter. But here, some of them claim to be Jewish, which is very suspicious. Last week, President Trump threatened to strip the funding from schools and colleges that allow these illegal protests. But actually, he did not elaborate on what he meant by that. And with the Columbia University being struck down off the funding phase, news has now come in. And the news is not good for these institutions. President Trump's administration has cancelled the $400 million federal funding that Columbia University used to get. And then for the inaction, why was it done? For the inaction in the face of persistent harassment of the Jewish students, and that was actually happening. The Trump administration has not said whether that decision was based on a particular finding from any of these investigations into the religious discrimination that were opened up during the last 14 months of the Biden administration. Instead, Trump's new anti-Semitism task force has notified Columbia on March the 3rd about a particular comprehensive review that they were conducting of the school's federal contracts and grants. The Trump administration has announced that it was pulling out the $400 million from the Columbia University. And of course, it happened 4 days later after this particular announcement. The Trump administration has also invoked an obscure legal statute to arrest and deport the recent Columbia graduate who led the protest. But that has been actually stayed by a judge, but then the actual federal judge has ordered him not to be removed from the United States as of now. But that can be changed any day. In fact, during a confirmation hearing last month for Linda McMahon, Mr. Trump's education secretary, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, the Republican chairman of the Senate Education Committee, pressed Mrs. McMahon about how she would direct the department to address the backing of the anti-Semitism investigation. At the time, she told Mr. Cassidy that she needed to learn more about the issue. On Friday, 4 days later, she understood everything that was there, and we saw after her confirmation the department announced that it would prioritize the resolution of the anti-Semitism investigation. According to the department record, there were active investigations into religious discrimination at 40 of the 60 college campuses when Mr. Trump assumed office. At the time, nearly all of these colleges, many of the we saw cases, were more or less 14 months old. And of course, an online database of existing federal investigation into the colleges and universities has not been updated since Mr. Trump took over in January. And the Education Department spokesperson said he was unable to provide information beyond the agency's news release. Mrs. McMahon said that in a statement on Monday that the federal funding was a privilege for colleges and contingent on scrupulous adherence to anti-Semitism laws. So the US government is going very, very strict on this, and they are ensuring that there is no loophole left. The department is deeply disappointed, she said, that the Jewish students studying on elite US campuses continued to fear that the safety among the students in the relentless anti-Semitism that has severely disrupted campuses' life for more than a year. In fact, that is one of the main reasons. And in fact, the follow-up story of mine is also based on that. After this particular protest was done and the boy was removed from the campus, the so-called leader was removed from the campus. We will see that story as we go along after this. President Trump is very clear. He is telling students, if you have come to study in the United States, just do that. Don't try to get into protest and wokeism. In fact, we are not talking about a warning to the wokes at JNU in India or the mother, Jadavpur University and the University of Hyderabad and other places. President Trump has insisted that there has to be a clear message that needs to go to foreign students. And of course, even green card holders who espouse the views that are inimical to the security of the United States. And you should expect that you will be deported to your home country, according to President Trump. In fact, a significantly broader interpretation of the existing US laws is being spoken about with regards to the deportation of legal residents, because something that was not thought about before. But now they say President Trump's officials on Monday indicated they had literal tolerance for the political activism by foreign students and resident aliens, such as the anti-Israel protests that have been happening in many so-called liberal US college campuses, which they see as a tantamount to the support for the terrorists like Hamas. No one has a right to have used a visa or a green card if you support terrorism, and we don't want you here. That is exactly what the Trump government is saying. In fact, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Trump's Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller even said there's a New York judge, as he ordered administration not to deport the person concerned who was arrested from Colombia. But Mahmoud Khalil, the graduate student who was arrested, will still face the law, the full force of the law, because he has been arrested for his support to the Palestinian cause, as he was speaking about in campus demonstrations at Columbia especially. Vast number of foreign students, nationals who support terrorism and reject American values have been awarded visas, and revoking them is a national security imperative, said Mr. Miller, on an anti-immigration hardliner he is. And he said in a post on X that we must not only admit that those who embrace the core principles of civilization should be there, otherwise they should leave. Trump officials have not laid out the case for Khalid's arrest. Of course, the deportation clearly states that he needs to go back to where he came from. In fact, Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has been tasked with deporting illegal immigrants from the United States. He warned the Palestinian activists could be the first of the many legal foreign nationals who could be sent packing back home despite having US permanent residency, which is green cards, because their political activism, which the Trump administration sees on supporting terrorism, violates US laws. The Homeland Security Department, where Mr. Homan is in charge of the enforcement and removal operations of Trump's, as he was doing, include Khalil's deportation that will happen. In fact, the former Columbia graduate student was arrested for his activities aligned with Hamas, a designated terrorist outfit. And that is important. A designated terrorist outfit like Hamas was being supported by a US student who was actually a green card holder. Of course, while the New York judge Jesse Furman has stayed Khalil's deportation, saying he will review the petition challenging the legality of the detention, the State Department is expected to rely on the provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 that says that any alien whose presence or activities in the United States, the Secretary of State feels as a reasonable ground to believe would have potentially serious consequences, adverse foreign policy consequences of the United States, should be deportable. And that is very important. And that is what the US government will argue in the court. In fact, Mr. Homan said that Khalil could be the first of many immigrants who will be kind of thrown out of the country. And this first arrest is of many more to come. And that's a big, big threat for students who are there. My advice to Indian students who are going there, don't get into all this. Just do what you're there for. Study. Get back to the library or wherever it is, or get back to your home. Don't get into these activities. We are not there. We are a guest there. Remember that. And if you try to do all that, all the hard-earned money that your parents have put into it, into sending you to the US, will go waste. That is what even the visa issuing authorities are now going to come up with, that standard procedure to tell students who are being visa not to indulge in all these things. In fact, according to US authorities, there are many more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who are engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration would not tolerate it. Trump said that even this issue has become lightning and test case for the First Amendment relating to free speech. As that happens, we've been speaking about the universities, about what happened in Columbia when the $400 million grant was withdrawn by the US government or frozen by the US government. Harvard now announced that it's freezing hiring even as Trump threatens to withdraw funding, because Harvard has still not got the full impact of the freeze. They will get it soon. Harvard University will temporarily freeze hiring as the risk of federal funding cuts by the Trump administration threatens the finances of some of the most prestigious American colleges. In fact, Harvard is the richest university with almost $53 billion of endowment and is one of the several schools under the scrutiny for its failure to tackle anti-Semitism in the campus. In fact, the Harvard University authorities say that we need to prepare for a wide range of financial circumstances and strategic adjustments, and that will take time to identify and implement, according to Harvard President Alan Garber. Now, these are not good days for these colleges. I mean, they enjoyed the last 2 to 3 years having this wokeism in the campuses. Now, President Trump is cracking down hard, and his team is ensure that each and every one of those who indulge in all this their visas will be revoked and they'll be sent back home. Consequently, according to Harvard themselves, the Harvard University themselves, it is imperative to limit significant long-term commitments, and the university knows that the money is now not going to come from the federal government funding, and they don't want the financial exposure to make further adjustments more distant. Harvard's pause is meant to kind of preserve the financial flexibility until their leadership understands, or better understands, how the things will change the federal policy and what shape it can take and the scale of its import and impact. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that students go to study in US universities, not to indulge in politics. You can use all your freedom of expression nonsense to try and do all this kind of stuff, but that doesn't really work. If you're gone there for studying, study and get back home. Get back to your country. And even if you want to try for a green card or something, go do it legally. But there again, don't try and get into politics. That's not your cup of tea. That's not what you're meant there for. Of course, it's your prerogative if you want to be kicked out, and that's what will happen. Let us see how things pan out from here, and surely I will keep you updated about the latest happenings as and when they happen. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.